Welcome, everybody who's here. Thank you for coming. I want to remind you to turn off your phones or at least silence them before we begin. So I'm very happy to welcome Edra Soto to Brown. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I just want to do a brief synopsis. Edra was born in Puerto Rico, and she's a Chicago-based artist, educator, and curator, and co-director of the outdoor project space, The Franklin. She got her master's degree at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago in 2000, and she's attended Skowhegan and the Robert Rauschenberg Foundation, among other residencies. Edra's work has been she's been showing a lot recently, but she's presented her work at the Pérez Art Museum in Miami, the Museum of Contemporary Art of Chicago, among others. So without any further ado, please welcome Edra Soto to the
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I usually, when I do a presentation, I start with this picture because it's the only picture that I actually have myself in front of the church, which is in Puerto Rico, and this is the place where I grew up. I did my elementary and high school years in this school. It's called Academia Nuestra Señora de la Providencia, and it's a Catholic elementary and high school. And one thing about that experience is, I guess first I start thinking about how children get indoctrinated and with no permission or any idea, you are just receiving all this education and information, and there's really no idea what it really means. And another part is my experience as a child visiting this place every day. And guess I'm gonna dive in. So that's me in front of the church now. This was last year. Sadly, my dad passed last year, and the church happened to have the same priest that I grew up knowing when I attended this elementary and high school. And he dedicated a mass to my dad. And my brother and I attended this day. And I took pictures of the inside of the church. I think about how this place have influenced my practice, my art practice. I think about organized religion as a system that have different things, like the different aspects, like how it congregates people, how it have this type of theatrics that are similar to installation work. And the stage and the props, the sculptures that you will find in the space. So I think about this, and revisiting the space kind of helped me confirm like these parallels. I think about my work. I think about what my work generally focuses on, and it focuses on relationships. I think about my personal relationships and how I collaborate with who's my partner in many occasions, my husband. My geographical relationships, my relationship between Puerto Rico and the United States, and how living in Puerto Rico for 26 years and living in Chicago now for 20 years, it almost matches my living experience in these two places. Puerto Rico being a colony, but also a very, very different place from what living in the experience of living in the U.S. So I study at, I guess I knew about my tendency for, my taste for art in high school. And from there, I decided to pursue a bachelor's degree, and I went to the only school that Puerto Rico has that gives a bachelor's degree in art, which is Escuela de Artes Plásticas de Puerto Rico, and it's located in Old San Juan, in a colonial building that used to be a hospital. And this was a really great experience for me, but it was also focused on traditional practices like painting and sculpture and printmaking. And I did a commercial art career that led me to some success, where I had a couple of exhibitions that I sold, and then won a fellowship that gave me the opportunity to live and work in Paris for 1 year. It was through a Puerto Rican foundation. And that was pretty significant because it was the first time that I got to live or left Puerto Rico and had an perspective outside of Puerto Rico. I actually didn't imagine my life outside of Puerto Rico. And having that experience really changed and influenced the rest of my life, my decisions. So having this commercial career also made me question what I was doing. I always felt that I wanted to do things besides painting, and I didn't know how to approach them, and also didn't validate anything that was outside of this traditional way of making art. And I actually decided to pursue my master's degree in education, and I decided to go to the School of the Art Institute because the gallery that represented me back then when I was in college, they had an artist that had great success, who was a Puerto Rican artist that went to the Art Institute. So that was my reference. I really didn't knew much more than that. And so I decided to go there. I got accepted in this program called the Post-Baccalaureate program, and I did my first year there, which allowed me to get to know the institution and get to know the faculty and get to know the city. And it was a great experience for me, and from there I went to do the master's degree. And during that first year that I was doing the post-baccalaureate, I started questioning my painting practice. And I think being in that institution made me realize that I just couldn't, I didn't really relate to the elitist kind of situation of being a painter and the public that receives painting. I don't think I see it that way now, but I guess it was just not meant to be for me to be a painter. And I love painting so much. I love art, but it was not my true way of manifesting myself and my ideas. I think I couldn't really connect with people through my painting, and my painting became more and more abstract during the time that I was at the Art Institute, that post-baccalaureate year. So during the summer, in the transition of joining the MFA program, I moved to a new place to live, and then there was an area in proximity to that house that had all these really strange stores that sold a lot of crap, a lot of like like kind of dollar stores type of places, and I start collecting things and decorating this my bedroom. And I told my advisor at the time what I was doing, and she told me, "Oh, you have so much enthusiasm for this that maybe you should think about this as your work." And that really resonated with me, and it actually, I think, it set the tone for the rest of my art career. So the day of the introduction to the MFA department, I asked the faculty if I could go first, if I could do my presentation first so I could then go home and get my house ready. So I'm sorry? I kind of heard some, sorry. So I went first, and I showed pictures of this room, and I say I call it the I Love Milwaukee Avenue project, right? And that the room was going to be for viewing that night, and everybody was invited. So I went home and got their house ready, and everybody went to my house, and it was really exciting. And that was actually the first time that I felt that I actually was connecting through my work with others. And, well, that's the story. I did, during the MFA years, I did this project called the I Love Chicago project, and the 1720 represents the room, my studio space. And it was located in the painting department, which at that time, even though the SAIC, the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, they encourage students and artists to join different departments and be exercising in an interdisciplinary practice. But at that time, it was somewhat conservative, and my studio was like a fluorescent pink and gold light bulb in all the mauve and creamy colors. So I think that didn't make me very popular, but I had a goal, so I had to kind of obey my instinct in this situation, and decided to create this space that allowed me to bring a variety of disciplines together. That was my goal at that point. I want to create a space that I can be very inclusive and bring all kinds of disciplines in harmony into this place. So the installation was about my relationship with the city and the institution. So you see the lions. This is how it kind of looked. I created a character for myself. These pictures are like 35 millimeter, like prints. That's why they're so. I'm old. So, but I created this kind of stop motion animation using slide projections that I recorded myself doing a choreography, like a dance choreography, as a lion tamer, and it was kind of rolling the first 5 minutes before I open up the space for people to walk in. And during that time also, there's one thing about being Puerto Rican, for me, in my experience, I didn't really use sarcasm in the way I express myself. And so it became a situation where I kind of felt that I was being insulted constantly by others. And I think it was mainly my lack of experience living in America and experiencing just sarcasm in general, using sarcasm in language. And I had this studio mate that handed me this book called The Affirmations for Artists. And it was a ridiculous book that had all this, self-help hope for artists. And I decided to join his sarcasm, and every time I had to do a presentation, I read a quote from the book. So this was my roommate that also was a professional musician. They're the Lions. And that happened to be the person that is my husband today. And I have skipped most of my career till this point because this is 12 years later. I make this, and I make it in collaboration with my husband. And this is the first time we collaborate as well. But during all those years, those 12 years, I had a big relationship with the artist-run community. And through that relationship, I got a lot of visibility and my first solo exhibition at the Museum of Contemporary Art of Chicago. And so that was quite revelatory for me. I have a passion, a love for art. I think bringing people together is an important thing in my life. And so I decided to create this space. I was actually kind of begging my husband for years, let's do it, let's make a artist-run space. And he was like, no way, we're gonna alter our life inside the house. But this community college offered me an exhibition. And they gave me a year to get ready for this exhibition. And at that point, I've been doing all this crazy, like very ambitious installation work, and it was kind of exhausting to make work that then you really don't know what to do with. So it wasn't very practical. And I was raised somewhat pragmatic. I needed to think about, like, what am I going to do with this material? And I started also feeling somewhat guilty because I'm Catholic, or I was Catholic. I'm not a practicing Catholic. But anyway, it sort of led us to think about doing a project space in our backyard. At that point, we moved to this house that is located in East Garfield Park, which is a historic African-American neighborhood. And we're so lucky to have this little house there. We've been living there for 10 years. And actually, the thing that sold us to that house was the patio. We have a big, nice patio, and it's really fun to have a patio when you live in Chicago, because we can experience all the seasons. Anyway, so we talk about how to collaborate as an intellectual partners rather than just him helping me fabricate things. I wanted him to kind of join me in this endeavor. And we decided to make this space. I called it Franklin because we live in Franklin Boulevard. And for this particular exhibition that we call Living by Example, and I took the name Living from Martha Stewart Living magazine because I wanted to highlight the DIY culture. So this is the space. We were able to create this particular space that we designed thinking about the different models, the existing models that were available for artists to exhibit work. And we decided to create something that, in my hope, it be a contribution to this artist-run community rather than just an additional apartment that it was going to be painted white or a white cube or a type of similar model. So this particular model have this ventilation system, and it also have 6 walls that are removable. And for this particular exhibition, we exhibit work that we have been collecting. My husband and I like collecting. I traded a lot of work during the years through my relationship with the artist-run communities. This is some work. It actually look a little different right now, but it's a part of our collection. My husband is a furniture maker as well, so we have some of his furniture in the house, and art that I have traded with others, and art that we have bought through nonprofit organizations and artist-run spaces. That's the bathroom. A lot of these trinkets are from my traveling through Europe, and then friends and artists like giving me objects to add to this collection. And this is how it looks in the backyard. That was like the first opening, the first exhibition at the Franklin. It's kind of in a more casual situation with no art. And this is how it looks, the structure, how we design it. So professors and colleagues from different institutions, they bring their students, and we get to talk about the collection, a collection that is private, becoming public when people visit, and then talking about the philosophy of living with art. This is how it looks at night. We have different types of projects, so I'm just gonna talk about this one because this is probably one of my favorites. This one was made by an artist. His name is Chris Smith, and at that time he was a bachelor's student that had different projects that were very intriguing for me. He was very much one of those young artists that created different projects. So he had two different artist-run spaces. One was Sofa King, the other was the second bedroom. He also did another project called the Medicine Cabinet, and it was really, really cool, just like how he created community at such a young age. And he created this project that is called Conserver, where he is responding to the Garfield Park Conservatory, which is in proximity to our house. And he sealed the gazebo space to create humidity, and then he created a furnace that to create humidity, and he adopted plants from different conservatories to bring them back to life. A very, very cool project. So one of my favorites. I thought that maybe the gazebo was going to get burned, but it survived, and everybody's fine. And it was very, very great. And he actually is currently finishing his master's at Northwestern University. So we have different types of projects. I'm just gonna show them to you. This is Love Work, who actually did a bigger exhibition similar to this one at Garfield Park Conservatory. Joseph and Sarah Belknap. And this beautiful installation was made by Carsten Long, who is an artist, but also a curator. He's a curator at the Renaissance Society, and did a wonderful job. This was an exhibition curated by Yoni Bear. So at this point, I like to share the space. Sometimes I curate exhibitions. I have other parts of the house activated, like in the basement, we have a monitor that I call it the flat screen, and we show video work. And we have some of the tables in the living room that we use for flat work. And that way I can be inclusive, like I didn't pursue becoming a nonprofit because it was going to be difficult for me to have an organic program. And as an artist, it was going to be very hard for me to basically run two careers. And when you're an artist, you have to do a lot of administrative work for your personal career. So having a nonprofit is out of the question. So, but I love art so much that having this project space allowed me to give visibility. So we do it like that. We do it out of generosity. I promote it the best way I can. We provide beer and, a reception, and we share the cost of shipping, stuff like that. And people, artists that want and need the space, I'm very, very open to ideas and for curators and artists. All right, so this project, it was my second biggest collaboration with my husband, and it's called Domino on Domino, and it grew out of my through my need to have my husband work on some. I'm sorry, I'm losing it. All right, so you will find a concrete table like this, of this type of model in any plaza in San Juan, in Puerto Rico, in any part of Puerto Rico, in a plaza which is the center of the county. And my husband, right now, he's been fabricating furniture, and his style is mid-century modern type of work. And one thing that I think I haven't said, my husband is Caucasian, and we kind of share things and also have a lot of differences. But one thing that we really can experience is, like a time for vacation where we can have fun doing something that we like. And Domino became that particular thing. And for many vacations, we spend drinking and playing dominoes. And when it occurred to me to ask him, I think these tables, the style of this table really remind me of the type of furniture that you make. I think you should make a similar model like this one in your mid-century modern style, but for indoors, and something that can be exhibited in a gallery or in a museum. And another thing that I stumbled while doing the research for this project was this project that Marcel Duchamp did back in the 1920s, when he was there was this big rumor about him just thinking that he wanted to stop making art to master the art of playing chess. And I was thinking, how wonderful it'd be if we could actually do that, just like stop doing anything and just dedicate ourselves to playing dominoes. But it was that fantasy. I think that also came up around a time where it was always working all the time and busy, and it kind of provided that fantasy. So we kind of took it somewhat seriously. And this project traveled from Chicago. It went to the Expo art fair, and then it went to the East Harlem, and this was included in an exhibition in partnership with the curator of the Pérez Museum, and this was the first exhibition at the. I'm sorry, but I'm gonna move here. Hunter East Harlem Gallery. This is the first exhibition. It went from New York to the Pérez Museum. And at that time, the curator of the Hunter East Harlem Gallery was really, really interested in having the table at her gallery, because she knew about this Puerto Rican community that lived really close from there. And they played domino all the time in proximity to the area of the gallery. And she was saying if we have the table here, they will move inside during the winter. And true enough, this was during the opening of the exhibition. And when we got there, we actually got there right on time, by the beginning of the opening. And already it was crowded with this community, and they were actually having a little feud because it was like man and woman, sort of like, kind of like fighting for the table. And it really moved us. Like I was in tears, I could not believe it, and it kind of made me feel like, oh yeah, this is what people make art. So from there, this is a picture at the Pérez Museum, and some photos from social media at the Pérez. All right, so I'm moving to what I'm doing right now. That I've been working on this project for now it will be 2 years. This is me with my dogs, Foster and Soul. Actually, Foster, the bigger dog in the foreground. I found him on a Valentine's Day, maybe like more than 10 years now. It was a blizzard, and he was covered in dirt and ice. And I got so lucky. I call it my my first love, you know. He's amazing. We have a connection, this dog and I. Anyway, and the little one also was given to me in Puerto Rico. In Puerto Rico, there's the bad habit of raising a lot of dogs and doing puppy mills and all this stuff. And so this dog was pretty neglected as well. But they are really beautiful and in great shape now. Anyway, so in 2017, which is when I started this project, I was working part-time at the School of the Art Institute and was the designated dog walker. Okay. This will be a side street in my neighborhood. I knew about this problem. There's a problem of littering and garbage in this community. Might not see it at first sight, and maybe you're not thinking about it, you might not see it, but it's very prominent. And that will be a sidewalk that is never clean, very close to my house. I call the project Open 24 Hours, and it refers to this side walks and side streets and alleys that have never been cleaned by the city. I start noticing that there's a lot of bottles of all kinds of booze, all kinds of liquor. This will be an example of something really strange that I will find. There was a gym bag with tennis shoes and a bunch of bottles, empty bottles. So there will be little still lifes that will tell me, oh, there are people having fun that night, and is what they left behind. So one thing that really caught my attention was these bottles of cognac. And growing up in Puerto Rico, I wasn't really familiar with cognac. I'm more familiar with rum and beer, but cognac was not in my family tree. So I started wondering about these bottles, and they're actually very beautiful bottles that are actually expensive. If you go to, one large bottle of Remy Martin, which are also like represented in this picture in this green bottles. One of those bottles will be like $44, and that's finding a lot of these bottles everywhere. But all kinds of liquor, but the cognac became the one that I end up finding the most. There's no supermarkets around that area. And this is like I said earlier, this is a historic African-American neighborhood that is framed by two landmarks. There's the Center for Green Technology on one side, and there's the Garfield Park Conservatory on the opposite side. And then there's the boulevard right in the middle. And in the middle of the boulevard, in Kedzie Street, there's this liquor store that you see here. And it's pretty happening. And there's a lot of music also. And I like and love hip hop and rap, and I will listen to it all the time. Just happen to be listening. I don't have an iPod, or I don't buy music online, anything. I used to listen to music a lot when I was growing up in Puerto Rico. I had a taste for American music, and I was thinking about this. I was thinking about mainstream culture and how that was the kind of music that I grew up, music that was provided, that I listened through the radio. So mainstream became quite influential. And now my husband's also a musician, and a lot of the first part of us living together and the life that we've been together 16 years, and all these years, there's so much music around that I felt somewhat saturated by music, so I don't buy it and I don't consume it that way, but I listen to it from my car, in my car, on the radio, and I like to listen to this kind of music, this hip hop and rap music. And I was listening to this song from Drake called For Free. Have you heard this song? For Free? It's kind of filthy. But in the lyrics, he's saying that he got off the Hennessy. And this really clicked at that moment, and I was thinking, I think I might find the reason why, because at that point I had so many bottles of Hennessy. Maybe I should say I noticed this problem perhaps like 5 or 6 years ago, and the most popular bottle that I will find will be the Patron, the tequila Patron. I guess it was pretty fashionable at that time, and that was the drink of, the trendy drink at that moment, and people were really consuming it. And I gathered a bunch of these bottles of Patron, but I really didn't know what to do with them, so I ended up recycling them. And so the Hennessy, all right. So I decided to research the relationship in between African Americans and cognac, mainly because I live in this historic African American neighborhood, and that music is very prominent, the music that I like, the hip hop and rap. So I decided to do this search, and I found that there's a history that have its genesis in the 1930s, when the black soldiers were serving during the world wars. They were introduced to cognac, and cognac being made in France. At that time, during the 1930s, while African Americans are being oppressed in the United States, their music and their culture is being celebrated in France. And in this amazing book of the Bourbon Empire, the author talks about how sweet it must taste for African Americans, the cognac. Because obviously when you are being celebrated, when your culture is being celebrated, well, it became in a way, it became a way of exercising democracy, a really unique, particular way of deciding I'm going to consume what is celebrating my culture. So yeah, there's a passage here talk about how through the popularity of the jazz and the blues, and how through the music, they found the acceptance. And then the music, again, in contemporary life, through hip hop and rap, is sort of like a rebirth of this relationship. There's a example here of the soldiers in France. And so in this book, this particular video is attributed to refurbish that relationship in between African Americans and the cognac. So this is a picture that I took from the Walgreens in downtown Chicago. I start thinking about product placement and how conspicuous it sometimes is, where you will find a setup of this kind right next to the cashier. So primarily a visual artist. I never thought about, I like to think about community and how to bring people together, but something like social engagement, it really didn't came to my life deliberately. I didn't plan to be a social engagement artist, or I'm not sure if I am, but I think my interest was more about responsibility and how you, to me, garbage and picking up garbage is a sign of education. I learned that actually when I was in high school. The teacher will take us to the hallway and that she will tell us, now everybody, even if it's not your piece of garbage, you pick it up and you throw it in the garbage. So I start thinking, I associate, picking up garbage with education. And I think about this, how that manifests, different communities and people and education in all kinds of ways. Unfortunately, there's not, I guess, a sense of recycling or promoting that, and also the city neglecting this sector of the community. So when I started doing the project, I felt the need to have an evidence and didn't want people to think about it as a fictional thing. So I will go on a walk, and on my walk, I will bring a bag and I will fill it, and then I will take a picture like this so I can remember what kind of liquor I find that day, and then I will clean it, I will document it, I save the days where I find the grouping of the bottles, and then this actually is not part of the documentation. This one is a representation of all the different cognacs that I have found. But I will document it in this particular format. I start thinking about how to connect with our history. I'm thinking about my role as an artist and how will I present this to my audience, and my audience is people that consume art, people that look at art, and how I can provide a look at this situation and this in a way that didn't come across as just judgmental, and that it provide a pleasant entrance that everybody could in some way relate to it. So I created these still lifes, and I start documenting my findings in this way. I thought it was necessary to strip the bottles from their identity, so they were not pointing to a particular demographic. I feel like I'm missing something, but it will come to me. Sorry. I like to try different things and challenge the different kinds of formats that I adopt to document my project. So I did these particular snapshots that I did at my house. I put a piece of white paper in front of the white wall, and it provided me like a quick way to document the bottles, but also I did other ideas, like this is a risograph process. I wanted to try to make them look like an ad, but also maybe like a painting, kind of like a devious kind of presentation, but also like a pleasant way of kind of bringing people in, and also maybe awake the curiosity of what are these bottles, where are they coming from. All right. So, I guess maybe one last thing that I'm going to say about liquor is that alcohol, liquor in general, it really, I think it's a very important thing in our society. It really frames some of the most important moments in our lives. Like if you get married, you will celebrate with champagne. You have your birthday, you might want to get drunk. So, well, liquor, it just have its role in society. It also can lead to tragedy and addiction. But as an artist, I don't think I would like to be judgmental about, alcohol. It actually, after learning about the historic connection in between cognac and African Americans, I actually felt great empathy for my community and for the bottles, and I actually love them and value them in this way, and I decided to think about what will be pleasant ways of bringing this message about what is happening in this community. So I did the documentation, which can be exhibited in a gallery setting or in a museum setting, but also there's a problem of the bottles and all the amount of bottles, the accumulation of these bottles, and I start thinking, well, if I create some type of a project where I can put the bottles in other people's hands, then we can really share the stories about what is happening in this neighborhood more directly. So I created a workshop that allowed me to also talk about my relationship with living in the United States and my identity as a Puerto Rican. And I started thinking about these particular objects, thinking about these shells, and shells being something that, the shell as the house for an organism, and thinking about how the shell can, and decorating a bottle with shells could become a new house for the substance that you used to live in that bottle. And also a house for a new home, but also a way of kind of putting the bottle in people's hands, giving the bottle to other people. People engage through this process by decorating and embellishing the bottles with these shells, and then personalize them Also, there's a material compatibility in between shells and glass, like glass being made out of sand. And I had this friend curator that pointed out to me that my gesture of picking up bottles felt similar to the gesture of like going to the beach and picking up shells. And all these pictures that I took were in a souvenir shop in Puerto Rico. And I found this particular one that I thought it was kind of ugly, but really intriguing to me. So I went and figured out what was going on with this. So this is a representation of the original Valentine. So the original Valentine will be a sea scene, like a stamp of the sea, where a sailor in the old times, he will go in his journey, and at the end of the journey, he will bring to its loved one a heart-shaped box. And I started thinking, it really makes sense to turn the bottle into a souvenir that people can take with them. So I started doing experiments, like decorating the bottles myself, and then I started working with different communities and try the project. Let's see. This is in Washington University. We did the workshop. That was the first time that I tried the project. And I asked the students to bring their own garbage from the neighborhood. I talked to them about my findings, my bottle findings, and then we did this project. It was really fun. These are the single mothers that live in the Project Row houses in Houston. We did a little workshop there with the bottles that I found there in Houston. Mostly beer because it's hot down there. And this is the iteration of the project at the Museum of Contemporary Art. They created a new space called the Commons, and the Commons is dedicated to civic and social engagement. And I actually found it weird that they invited me to inaugurate this, and also I never have self-proclaimed that I'm a do social engagement. I'm not an activist. I think about my civic responsibility, and perhaps because of that and the Franklin, I think people think about my practice as something that it tends to include others. But I guess I just always think about relationships and how, for me to make art, it need to have real meaning to me. It need to have a meaning. So this particular format allowed me to bring a lot of bottles to the Museum of Contemporary Art and create a workshop. So we create a series of workshops that have different components. I organize my exhibition. One part of this project at the Commons at the MCA in Chicago will be that they let me as an artist take charge in the kinds of the program that I want to create for my project. So I organize a series of performances that were responding to Open 24 Hours through other artist projects. I focus on artists that make music and a music component in their work to make this connection to Open 24 Hours. I also did a project that it could be happening even if nobody's there at the space, which was a series of prompts that asking questions about littering and democracy and identity and segregation. I created these tables. I tried different ways, and this allowed me to create these tables where people can cast the shells with air dry clay. And I created a contract to make the experience, to control the experience and make the audience feel that they were going to engage into something special. I think if you try to give something away for free, it's not the same as if you really, engage the audience and telling them, well, this is what I think it is. If you want to learn more, you can engage with us. So I created this contract that it was a piece of paper that people had to sign and also put their email and their phone number. And in this contract, I talk about the bottles as a piece of American history. And it was just one strategy to engage and their curiosity. And it was it was probably one of the most satisfying projects. All kinds of people were I think they were equally attracted to the bottles than the way I am attracted to them when I see them. They're very beautiful objects. You think about hip hop and rap culture, are building a type of fantasy that is a way of engaging in luxury, in this fantasy life of luxury. And many of these bottles are one component of that fantasy. This was an opportunity for me to bring this project together, which was bringing a traditional bomba music, which is traditional Puerto Rican music, with a heavy metal band. Another project of another artist that used bottles in her work, and she used microphones to create sound with the bottles. And this artist, Felicia Holman, she have real life experience for her and her family consuming cognac and a lot of knowledge about the liquor, and it was quite entertaining and fun to watch her perform. And she did a type of blessing of the bottle and offer everybody cognac, and it was really fun. We had a DJ, and she was my first guest in this experience, which actually I invited her again. And when I told her about my project, I actually invited her because she already works with a project that alludes to social music. And I was thinking, I think this is something that might interest you. And she created a playlist and wrote about it, and there's an entry on the MCA blog that she created that talk about this. So I took her playlist and I made it part of my exhibition. So her music, the music that she compilated, was playing perpetually during the time of the exhibition at the museum. And this is the project that really very beautiful. There's another entry at the museum blog, in the museum blog, that you can read some of the audience entries that are pretty amazing. It's talking about littering and democracy, identity and segregation. It just started making me think about how much people need, how how needed is that space for people to manifest themselves, you know, and be in the right place. And one, I don't know if you notice in some of the installation, I'm gonna go back here for a minute. Sorry. You see the detail on the installation work? So these patterns come from a project that I call Graft. And I'm getting there, thank you. Graft is vernacular architecture from Puerto Rico. And I started thinking about this in 2012, and by 2013, I started working on my first architectural intervention, where I make a representation of this pattern and symbolically transplant the pattern from Puerto Rico to any territory in the US. Was thinking about a physical presence, my physical presence in the US. And also thinking about these particular patterns that I couldn't really find information about them. To find information, I have to be really insistent and digging deep in research. But when you go to elementary and high school in Puerto Rico, you will learn everything about all the colonial buildings and structures and that surrounds us. But we live with these patterns, and these patterns were part of the lower middle class houses that they call the shotgun homes that are made in concrete and then are fenced with this type of fences. I'm going here. So these are examples of the fences. I've been documenting them for a while. And most of the fences will be made in Rhode Island, and you can also find the similar patterns made in concrete as well. So I decided to create a publication that complements the Graft projects that I have made in different institutions and museums. So I complemented with a literary component, and I invite writers from different disciplines to make a contribution and create a new history for these patterns. So I've done several iterations of this project. This was at Project Row Houses in Houston. It's a Sector 2337 in Chicago. Was a part of a traveling exhibition. This is an original pattern from fence. It's called in Spanish reja. And this is another iteration that I combine open 24 hours with Graft. So Graft allows me to frame the space and also fence it and provide this decorative character. This was at Headlands in Sausalito in California. And one of the last projects I did, and the first time I do more of a sculptural piece. One rule that I imposed to myself about Graft will be that I wouldn't make an object for sale itself, a decorative object. It will have to be an object that that you can physically interact with. And in this case, so I created this particular structure. I don't know if I have other pictures of it, but that you can, that in depending where you are situated, it will wrap your body. And maybe this is a good time for me to conclude this presentation. Sure. Do we have time? Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for coming.